Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. If you're a mom or a daughter and you've ever felt that quiet desire for deeper connection between you, but you don't want it to feel forced or uncomfortable, I want to invite you into something really special. It's called Becoming Together, a mother-daughter retreat in Sedona, Arizona, happening September 8th through the 12th, that I'm hosting alongside my own daughters. This experience is really close to our hearts because we understand that every mother-daughter relationship is unique and it's not always perfect. And this isn't about fixing anything. It's about creating a space to soften, to breathe, and to connect in your own way. Over a few beautiful days in Sedona, we'll guide you through experiences like breathwork, sound baths, mindful movement, even a vortex hike, and of course, nourishing meals. Each of us bringing our own gifts to support you, while also honoring your individual journey. There's no pressure to open up before you're ready, no expectation to be anything other than yourself, just a safe, supportive space to reconnect with yourself, with each other, and with something greater. If you feel even the smallest pull, you can find more information in the show notes, because you don't have to have a perfect relationship to begin becoming together. Welcome back to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm so glad you're here today. So wherever you're listening from, whatever season of this journey you're in, this space is for you. And today's episode is one that I felt really called to record after I got to spend some time with some ladies last night in a workshop, because it touches something that I heard playing out in their situations and in their lives last night. And I see it playing out again and again in the women that I work with. Something that keeps them stuck, keeps them hurting, and keeps them giving their power away without even realizing it. So today we're going to talk about the question that I come back to with my clients over and over again. And that question is, what message does the way I show up in my relationship give to my partner about the status of the relationship? I'm going to talk about this from a couple of different ways that it shows up, kind of opposite end of the spectrum. So stick with me throughout this whole episode, because this question will do something to you if you sit with it honestly. Because most of us, we're in the thick of betrayal trauma. We're not showing up in ways that reflect what we actually feel, what we actually need, and even what we actually are willing to do. And that disconnect between what we say and what we do, between what we feel inside and what we express outside, is quietly teaching our partner something that we never intended to teach them. So let's talk about it. Openly and compassionately and without judgment, because this isn't about blame. It's about reclaiming your voice, your power, and your sense of self. Before we get into the practical piece, I want to acknowledge something really important. When you've been lied to, manipulated, gaslit, and betrayed, often for months or years before you even know what was happening, your relationship with your own voice starts to become deeply complicated. Gaslighting is particularly destructive in this way, because when someone has consistently told you that what you see is not real, that what you feel is an overreaction, that what you heard is not what was said, your nervous system actually starts to doubt itself. You stop trusting your perceptions. You second guess your instincts. You learn to go quiet because speaking up was never safe or never believed and never really led to anywhere good. So when I talk today about saying what you mean and following through with what you say, I'm not talking about the version of you who hasn't been through anything. I'm talking to the woman whose voice was systemically undermined over and over. And that context matters. It changes everything about how we approach this work. Because rebuilding the alignment between your words and your actions is not just a communication strategy. It's actually an act of healing. And it's the process of learning to trust yourself again. So let me describe something that I see constantly, and I want you to tell me honestly, just to yourself, if any of this sounds familiar. So you're in a tremendous amount of pain. The betrayal happened. Maybe the disclosure, the discovery was recent. Maybe it was a month ago. Maybe it was a year ago, but the wound is still raw and deep. And inside of you, you're devastated, you're angry, you're scared, and you don't know if this relationship is safe, and you don't know if you can survive this. But on the outside, maybe you get up every morning, you make breakfast, you move through the house, you answer when he speaks, you perform a version of normal that has almost nothing to do with what is actually happening inside of your body. You've gone quiet, you've gone still, and you've done it because somewhere, maybe you learned this in childhood, maybe the relationship itself taught you this. You learned that your pain was too much, that your needs were inconvenient, that keeping the peace was your job. So you stay quiet, you stay down, and you tell yourself that you're being strong. But here's what usually happens with that, is that resentment is building. The pain that has nowhere to go, it doesn't just disappear. It accumulates, it goes underground, and it quietly, slowly poisons the well. And then one day, you hit your wall. You can't do it anymore. The grief and the anger and the exhaustion all surface at once. And you say something significant. Maybe you make a declaration, you draw a line, and he's genuinely caught off guard because from where he's standing, everything might have seemed fine. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying he was paying close enough attention to notice. I'm not saying his comfort justified your silence. But what I am saying is that when we suppress our truth for a long period of time and then finally erupt with it, we create conditions where our words don't land with the weight that they actually deserve. He doesn't have the context for how long this has been building, and the conversation becomes about how you said it rather than what you said. You're not being heard, and part of why you're not being heard is that your outside and your inside have not been aligned. Being quiet while dying on the inside isn't really strength, and it's not keeping the peace. It's not a form of being authentic to yourself. And you really deserve better than that. Not just from him, but from yourself. So maybe some of that scenario lands for you, and maybe that's not even relatable to you at all. Let me describe the other pattern I want to talk about today, which is equally common and equally costly. So maybe you've been suppressing, you've been trying to hold yourself together, and the pain builds and it builds until it explodes outward, and it comes out through our words, the declarations, the line in the sand. If you do this again, I'm done. I can't keep living like this. One more time and I'm leaving. And in that moment, you mean it. Every word, you mean it. The pain behind it is absolutely real. And then something happens. He gets quiet, or he apologizes, or he makes a gesture, or he starts to do things different for a short period of time. And that immediate pain softens just enough, and you don't actually follow through. And then it happens again. And again you say it. And again you don't follow through. That cycle of build up, explosion. He softens. He starts to do things differently. You soften again and you don't follow through. And the painful truth about what this cycle teaches him is that your words don't actually mean what they say. And that's not because you're weak, and it's not because you don't mean it in that moment, but because you haven't developed the internal infrastructure in yourself to back your words up with action. And so the pattern that was designed to protect you, declaring your limits loudly, has accidentally taught him that those limits are actually not real. And why would he change if there's no consistent consequences? Why would he take your words seriously if the pattern has shown him that they don't actually hold? And this is not about him being callous. It's about the fact that humans, all of us, respond to patterns. And the pattern he has learned is, I can wait this out. She'll come around. She won't actually follow through with that. And then you end up feeling more powerless than ever before you said anything. because now not only is the original wound present, but your own voice has lost credibility, including with yourself. And this is where I want to spend some real time, because there's a lot of confusion around this, and it really matters. I want to talk about the difference between a threat, an ultimatum, and a boundary. Okay? A threat is something that you say to control somebody else's behavior. It comes from fear and it comes from pain, and it's usually reactive. It's said in a moment of high emotion before you've had time to regulate and to get clear, because it's about controlling them. And it often falls apart when you realize that you actually can't control another person. Threats are external. They're aimed outward. Okay? An ultimatum is related, but it's a little bit different. An ultimatum is when you lay out a condition for the other person. If you don't do this, then I'll do that. And it can sometimes be appropriate. But when it comes from a dysregulated state, when it's said in a moment of crisis rather than clarity, it tends to land as manipulation rather than communication. And again, when not followed through, it erodes your own credibility. So boundary is something entirely different. And I want to slow down when I say this, because I think it's one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of healing work, all of boundary work, that a boundary is not a rule you set for someone else. A boundary is a decision that you make for yourself. Boundaries are internal. They're about you. They're about what you will and will not participate in, what you will and will not accept in your life, what you will do, and not what you will make him do. So rules sound like you can't talk to her anymore. And a boundary sounds like, if you continue to have contact with her, I will not remain in this marriage. Feel the difference? The rule tries to control his behavior. The boundary names your own decision. And that is everything. That's where your power lies. Because you can actually follow through with a boundary, because it only requires you to act. You cannot follow through on a rule, because you can't force him to do anything. This is why so many women come to me with what they call boundaries and what are actually a list of rules. And when those rules aren't followed, they feel powerless and violated. Not because they were wrong to want those things. Of course you're not wrong to want those things. But because the framing put all of the power in his hands. So when you shift from rules to boundaries, from trying to control him to deciding for yourself, something profound changes. You get your power back. And here's where the nervous system piece becomes really essential. Most of us, when we're in the middle of betrayal trauma, we're not regulated when we communicate. We're activated, we're flooded. And the threat detection system in our body is on fire. And in that state, we say things from a place of pain rather than from our truth. Both come from a real place, but they land very differently. Pain sounds like, I can't do this anymore. You never change. I'm done. And again, in that moment, you might actually mean that. But truth sounds like, I need to tell you that I'm not okay. And I need us to take this seriously, because I'm at a point where I'm making real decisions about my future. See the difference? One is eruption and the other is communication. And so what I would love to invite you into is the practice of slowing down, listening to your body, regulating and integrating before you communicate. And what does that look like practically? It means that when you feel the flood rising, that tightening in your chest, that heat in your face, that urgency to say something right now, you actually pause. You do not perform calm. You do not suppress it, but you give yourself enough time to move out of the reactive state and into the responsive one. The responsive state is where your power lies. So you breathe, you move your body, you journal, you call a trusted friend or your coach or your therapist, or you do whatever helps your nervous system come down from the ceiling. And then, from that more grounded and regulated place, you decide what you actually want to say and whether now is actually the right time to say it. This is not about being controlled or measured or less than. This is about being so clear in yourself that when you speak, you mean it. And when you mean it, you follow through. And when you follow through, your words begin to carry weight again with him, but more importantly, with yourself. So I want to say something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, okay? Sometimes the reason we don't follow through is not because we don't mean what we say in that actual moment, but it's because deep down, we might not believe we actually fully have the right to mean it. We don't fully believe we have a right to set a limit and hold it. We don't fully believe we have the right to have emotions and express them, not as eruptions, but as truth. We don't fully believe we have the right to make requests for safety and trust without being accused of being controlling. We don't fully believe we have the right to make a decision that just might make him uncomfortable. And this is one of the deepest layers of betrayal trauma and one of the most overlooked, because the gaslighting, the manipulation, the lying, all of that doesn't just damage your trust in him, it damages the trust in yourself. It erodes your belief that your needs are legitimate, that your pain is real, and that you deserve to take up space. And if you don't believe you have a right to set a boundary, you won't be able to hold it. And that's not because you're not strong enough, but because somewhere underneath the words, there's a voice that's saying, who are you to ask for this? And who are you to say that? And this is the internal work. This is the work that has to happen alongside the communication work. You have a right to protect yourself. You have a right to speak your truth. You have a right to make decisions that prioritize your healing. You have a right to expect that the person who hurt you shows up consistent, sustained, and with verifiable change if you're going to choose to stay in the relationship. And if he wants to rebuild trust and create safety. And you have a right to leave if they don't. You don't need permission for any of that, but you do need to believe it in your body and not just in your mind. And I want to close with something that I tell my clients all the time and remind myself as well, because it's one of the most important things that I've learned in my own healing process. And that is that stepping out of unhealthy cycles is going to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I wanted to wait until I felt good. And then I would go, okay, when this is no longer activating, when this isn't hard for me to do, then I'll know it's okay. No, the discomfort is actually not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something new. And when you start showing up differently, when you stop suppressing and start speaking, when you start threatening and start meaning what you say, when you stop asking him to follow rules and start honoring your own boundaries, it's going to feel weird. It's going to be strange. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It may actually even feel selfish. It may feel scary. And he's likely going to react with some confusion or defensiveness or anger because he's not used to this version of you. And your nervous system, which has been trained by years of painful pattern, may interpret that discomfort as danger. And it might not be danger. It might just be that this is change, and change is uncomfortable. And the only way to get a different result in your relationship and in your own healing is to be willing to do something different and sit in the discomfort of that for long enough to find out what becomes possible. I often remind my clients that sometimes it gets worse before it gets better as you're stepping out of those unhealthy cycles. Or maybe I should say it gets more uncomfortable before we can move into a healthier place. Remember that you're not here to keep the peace. You are here to tell the truth to him and to yourself. And so the question I want to leave you with today is the same one that I come back to again and again with my clients that I said at the beginning. What message does the way I'm showing up in this relationship give to my husband about the status of the relationship? And then, is that the message that I actually want to send? Because your actions are always speaking. The question is whether they're saying what you want them to mean. You're worthy of a love that is honest, consistent, and safe. And it starts with being that for yourself first. If today's episode stirred something inside of you and you're ready to go deeper into the healing, the boundaries, the rebuilding of your voice and your sense of self, I'm here. Find links in the show notes for more ways to connect with me. And please leave me a review and share my show with others who might need to hear this message too. I'll see you next week. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.